Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast. We are a podcast that talks about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, development, business, culture. If it matters to you, it matters to us, and we want to make sure it's in the forefront of all of us here at Fort Worth. Just like our last episode 2 weeks ago, where we talked about mercy culture, and I called it before, and I said this will be our biggest episode. I was shocked on how fast it became our biggest episode. It surpassed our biggest episode in 9 days, which was the other one was out, the District 11 debate, for 3 months.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest. It feels a little bit clickbaity to me. You know, It's a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and we're happy to bring information about that. We were discussing this morning how we hope people who maybe were new to the pod and came because of that topic will stick around for our regular format when we don't have a guest and it's just the two of us talking about things that we feel are important, and hope that the rest of the community sees the importance and value in as well. Yeah,
and how that works for everyone here is we do 3 short stories, 1 big story, and then wins and losses. We have guests throughout the months and make sure we get high quality people here to talk about what things are happening in their spaces. But as a journalism major background and a person who loves journalism, I think seeing the mercy culture thing blow up how it did is, to me, the yin and yang of making sure people eat their vegetables, but also keeping it spicy and entertaining and fun. And so I ask all of you, I doubt that all episodes will be as juicy as talking about the mercy culture peeps, but I also challenge everyone as they listen to this, of either in their car or they're walking their dog or folding laundry, that even when we get nerded out into some really interesting topics, that you stay with us, because even eating your vegetables is good for your mind and how you perceive the world, just like eating vegetables for your body. You may not like them, but they're good for you in the long run.
And I look at it as these things are important to be aware of and involved in, even when they haven't flared up and become some kind of a problem or a battle that you feel like you need to fight.
Yeah.
So this harkens back to many of the things that we've talked about, where we hope that people will pay attention and be involved on the front end so that things don't have to ratchet up to becoming a battle and a fight where people are on polar opposites of a topic, feeling like they can't find any common ground in the middle. So hopefully some of the things we talk about will still spark people's interest, and it won't just be us nerdy people talking to each other.
Well, this topic I actually think is really fun. The big topic here is about how there's projections that DFW will be the largest metro in 2100. That's all I'm about to give you there, and we'll dive into that as the big story to see what that looks like. But let's go ahead and dive into the short stories. Short story number 1 that we want to bring up is the Juneteenth Museum. So we had the CEO of Juneteenth Museum on the pod not too long ago. If you are new, I highly recommend you go listen to that one. The Juneteenth Museum is going to be coming out, releasing here soon in the next, year? I guess it'll be dropping in 2024, 2025. And then what we need to see here is they're raising $70 million. And what we know is that the city has given them $15 million. But only the state has only gave them is committing $1 million.
Yeah, the original ask was for $15 million, similar to matching what the city has done, but they fell short there. And I heard Miss Opal discussing this, saying that she's not done asking the state for more. So hopefully in the future they'll be able to do that.
And I know they're going to be doing events in 2024, but the official launch date is June 19th, 2025. We also saw that at the end of the day, I think this is a small story, but I think this is a punch to the gut, if you would say, because we were asking for 15 and you get 1. And you had Senator Cornyn out here doing the walk. I just think this is going to be a big loss, and we should expect our state to do more. I wonder, I know Opal says she's not giving up yet. I know Jared Howard is saying he has other ways he's going to continue to tell the story. But all in all, when you're trying to tell a story that in some places in the state, maybe not even give your story truth and even want people to hear it in the schools, this could have been a highlight point for the state of Texas to showcase that they care about all Texans and all history of Texas. and debunk all this, going back to your word, clickbait of what we're doing to, marginalized voices.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great investment in that community, and it's something that's important statewide. It's not just a local Fort Worth story, it's a state story. And I think that several legislators are quoted in this article. So I think we have their attention. And hopefully, as Opal said, that she'll be able to go back to them and possibly get some more funding for that in the future.
Jared Howard credited efforts from Senators Phil King, Kelly Hancock, Royce West, all of whom represent portions of Tarrant County, and Rep. Nicole Collier of Fort Worth for securing the funding. Hancock, a member of the Senate Finance Committee, along with West, submitted a proposed budget rider asking for the $15 million in federal stimulus money for the purpose of constructing the National Juneteenth Museum in Fort Worth. Collier also submitted a $15 million request with the House Appropriation Committee. The lawmaker also described how they huddled together in the museum discussions that sometimes included the lieutenant governor. King and Hancock are Republicans, West and Collier are Democrats. So, to me, there was bipartisan support could show that there's still hope.
There's just a lot of competition for those dollars, I think, is where we end up landing usually.
We have a limited amount of money, but you know what we have a lot of? Sunlight. And so tell me about story number 2.
Our second short story that rose to the top for us to discuss today was an article by the Fort Worth Report, Should Tarrant County Join Group Vying for an EPA Solar Power Grant, and that the commissioners say no for now. The Tarrant County Commissioners voted 3-2 against joining a coalition vying for millions of dollars in federal solar-powered funding, citing concerns about potential negative impacts of solar panels and an overall lack of information about the proposal. So it appears that some of the commissioners felt like they did not have enough information to vote yes for this. There was some information described about people being concerned that if people put solar panels on their homes, that then they later have trouble selling their homes. But I think that this was more an opportunity to have a better chance of receiving some federal dollars. If there's concerns about people being scammed or taken advantage of when they go with disreputable companies regarding putting solar on their homes, that's another completely different topic. And we should put effort into making sure that people are informed. But adults making decisions about whether they want to put solar panels on their homes or not, having that be an availability. I think several people have referenced this story as being similar to federal funding that we had an opportunity to receive for streetcars in Fort Worth, and we declined it back in the day, and that money ended up going to Dallas. They've mentioned in this article that possibly Tarrant County would try to submit applications for some of this funding on its own, but I think with a coalition of other counties working together, the likelihood that Tarrant County would get it on its own is not that great. So there was no requirement that Tarrant County do anything besides agree to work with these other counties to put in a stronger application, is my understanding, for these federal dollars. So I think that this is definitely something that maybe they'll revisit, since the article does say for now. And it seems like maybe with more information, some of those that voted against it could be persuaded.
Yeah, it says Tarrant County was eligible for 4.6% of the EPA dollars that was headed to the state. And so when you look at $400 million, that's a good chunk of the pie. I do think it's interesting how the coalition between the other metros, large cities, seem to be there, if I read that correctly. Bear.
Yeah, 4 large counties, Harris, Dallas, Travis, and Bear, had all joined together to create this solar consortium.
And it always feels like we're the ones not doing the thing when it comes to something like this.
Yeah, we've had a little history with that.
And but I also, to the point, solar, I don't know if people knocking on your doors saying we can integrate solar or whatever for you and doing all that stuff. And it's, to me, the problem with solar isn't solar. The problem with solar is capitalism trying to maximize their profits off of solar and then creating these weird laws and weird processes where I won't own the solar panels and they will own the solar panels. And
then you try to sell your house I've heard that those are problems, but again, having it available, I don't make decisions about what I'm going to put on my house, like an investment, like a solar panel on my front porch. So if someone is doing door-to-door sales, selling solar, that's not a decision I'm going to make standing on my front porch. Yeah. I will take the information that they have. I will go research. If I want to put solar panels on my house, I'm going to find the best deal that there is out there and do that research and get it done. I think that if that opportunity exists and people make smart decisions and don't get taken, then that's something that we should have access to.
Yeah. So that to me, the way we have approached solar is just the sticky part, the business side of it. It doesn't have to be like this. And that's why I don't have solar. And I don't have solar because to make the own investment to do so, and then, I own an old home. I need to worry about other things in that house before, and solar's only going to get more affordable,
And I've got trees all around my house, so there's not a lot of sunshine shining on my roof, so that makes a little less sense for me as well.
I mean, it's just going to go down in price, but I think we need to be auditing and questioning the flows and approaches of these scammy solar companies. And to me, it's sad when I see a neighbor do it that I didn't, and I see them do it, and they may just not know the best about it. I was able to ask the tough questions because, well, we do the 817 podcast, and we kind of stay with it. But to me, this is they're going into black and brown communities and trying to just say, here, let's put up some solar for free, and then they technically are owning and making profit off the light and the sun and using your stuff. So. You're using your roof. So we'll see. But O'Hare's comments about it all was just, saying nobody has it. I don't know. He seemed like he isn't against it. And he knows that Texas leads in solar. We lead in wind. We lead in these things. And I hope it's not one of those plays of, we're just an oil Texas, so we don't do things for solar. That he's why he voted no. I hope he's honest with what he said, why he voted no. And he's not just trying to showcase that everyone thinks Texas is just an oil town, when really we're leading in all the renewable energies as well. So this story was sent to us by our long-lost co-host, Jimmy Sweeney. He is still in the text messages. So
yeah, we asked him if he wanted to be dropped out. He said he still likes to know what's going on in Fort Worth. So until he says uncle, we'll continue to include him.
And it says that the TCU administrators expect the newly accredited medical school, Burnett School of Medicine, could give Fort Worth an economic impact of $4 billion by 2030. Basically, that comment ended with a snarky comment from Jimmy saying it seems a little bit dramatic and over-exaggerated. But really, I think the big part of here to me that I thought was why this story was so important is just the projections and need we're going to need for practitioners.
Yeah, it says as well as generate more physicians to meet the growing needs of Fort Worth.
Yeah, we have North Texas will have 2,986 physicians by 2032. However, to meet the region's demand for health care professionals, North Texas will need 4,760 physicians. So we need to grow over 50% to.
And for those who don't know, the medical school is being built in the near South Side in the medical district, so not on the campus of TCU, but over in the medical district. So Mike Brennan, who's the president of Near South Side Inc., described the school as one of the most significant milestones in the history of the medical district, a 1,200-acre area south of downtown that the city of Fort Worth established. This year has had a long history before this formal recognition, but it's got a recognition now of being like a medical district and an innovation district, and that the medical school is going to be a major ingredient to the mix of assets in the Near South Side that the Near South Side already currently brings to Fort Worth.
They're saying that the collaboration was estimated to annually bring in $850 million in healthcare and higher education sectors of Fort Worth and generate an annual $79 million in tax revenue for the state by 2030. It is also important to note that these metrics were predicted when UNT and TCU were going to do that partnership. So I don't know if them no longer doing that changes these projections on economic impact. Another data point that I thought was interesting is a TCU study estimated that 67% of students who complete their undergraduate and graduate medical training remain to practice in the community which is really cool. Yeah, great win. I haven't drove by it in a while. I don't know if they have a lot of progress or if it's moving and grooving.
Very much so. I still get questions. People, what is being built on the corner of Rosedale and Henderson? I think it is. Yeah.
All righty. So it is the big story time. And so we have a collection of stories and the right person in the room. And I'm not talking about me to discuss the future of us growing the Metroplex Fort Worth. We talked about how while we were gone, we saw a post about by 2100, DFW, Austin, and Houston will be the 3 largest metros in the country. And so obviously everyone ate that up. People like clickbait it. Someone reported, then Star Telegram put it on their website, and they didn't add any more reporting to it. They just kind of put the title and then the link to it to get some clicks. But I think about it, if you're a person who just bought a house, or if you're a person who's proud to live here, 2100 is what 80, 70, 7 years away, and so I don't know how excited you are personally about being the largest metro at that rate, but. And I would love to kind of walk through it with you.
It's interesting because growth and development seem to continue to dominate the news. And so this article that was shared on Culture Map Dallas, stating that Dallas-Fort Worth could be the biggest metro in the U.S. by the year 2100, the report says, stating that the Dallas-Fort Worth could eclipse New York City as the biggest metro area by that time. So I think based on current population and migration trends, America's 3 biggest metropolitan areas by 2021 will be DFW, Houston, and Austin, replacing New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago in the country's most populous metros, the report predicted. And so we've been talking about growth in our area for a long time, and the risks of these population booms and the effects that they can have on a lot of different things. I know that in Arizona, they have kind of started to put a little bit of a moratorium on some of this growth because they're running out of water. We constantly face situations where growth goes unfettered, and we end up with people who are upset about transportation and being able to get around. Whenever development is proposed, we hear back from people who are worried about the impact that it will have on schools, the impact that it will have on their commutes, the impact it will have on affordability, and all of these things keep coming up. So that first article was talked about this and got us kind of thinking about it. And then today in the Star Telegram, Sunday is the day that we're recording before we drop this pod tomorrow, Monday, there was a development boom in the outskirts of Dallas-Fort Worth as sprawl swallows small towns was a whole feature in the Sunday paper, where they talk about folks who have kind of moved further out in order to not be in the kind of urban core of cities. And then as the growth occurs, the things that they were trying to escape by moving out into those areas kind of catch up to them. And in some communities, there are restrictions on these types of things. There are growth boundaries. There are policies in place to kind of keep growth in the areas where the city has already planned for that infrastructure. In Texas, that's not as much of a thing, as we've discussed on previous pods, where we kind of are very focused on property rights. So if somebody owns some farmland and they want to sell it to a developer and build a lot of housing, they're more than free to do that. And the city kind of plays catch up. In most cases, they try to encourage that development to only happen where they already have plans to have that infrastructure. But we've seen evidence over and over again where that kind of hasn't happened. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that specific article. I just read it this morning, so I'm still kind of digesting it.
Yeah, my first overall takes was more around the article goes into like climate change and the issue there. Like they say there'll be 113 days over 95 degrees. And I don't know how you've been feeling about this summer heat. I don't know if I barely can do these 3 months and 2 weeks. I mean, it just feels like a lot. I don't know. I just think that if climate trends happen, I just don't see how this story could stay true. As maybe, I mean, it says that climate will impact like places like Atlanta and places south of us, which is why Dallas would grow. But even to me, we're not Phoenix or Atlanta, but we're also not the best place to be when it's hot. So, I mean, I totally can see me selling my house in 2050, 2060 to go live in Milwaukee, Detroit, or somewhere where it's like, especially if their winters become proven year over year to be less harsh. And I can then make the logical assessment of, wow, I'd rather take 30 days of bad winter rather than 115 days of 95 degrees. I think we're going to be competing against climate change on this. That was my first initial thought. And my second initial thought about it all is like, I think DFW overglorifies how big it is because like we lack the density. So I mean, like, right, Manhattan is the size of the DFW airport. So it's like, how are we, just because we keep growing out and adding more and more space to the metro, do we need to really honestly be honest with ourselves of, are we really that big, or are we just consuming more and more of Texas? And I think population it should be measured more on a kind of formula around density, because Milwaukee would be like 2.6 million if they were the same size as Fort Worth. And so that doesn't talk about like the growth part, but to me it talks about like, I think we're getting these like growth articles are for clickbait. And as Texans, we are proud. So we love to brag about these things, but then we're also not doing like an honest race or score on this stuff when we compare it to other people.
Yeah, and they touched on, infill development versus sprawl. And they talked about how there's not as much infill left, but I think there is still a lot of availability in the core. And it's easier to do development out in a greenfield where there's not as many things in the way or things that need to be corrected or cleaned up. But I think there's definitely an ability to do more infill before we continue to sprawl. And the importance of maintaining some open space too. I mean, that is part of why people come here. So if we're not going to be intentional about making sure that the amenities that people want to live around are maintained, it's not going to be a continued draw. People are going to come here and be disappointed. So, and I think a lot of the building out into the hinterlands is based on affordability. So the land in the core is more expensive, and so to build on that land is more expensive. To build a house out in the hinterlands is less expensive, but you have to look at the other costs of that. You are not close to the amenities that you have in a city. Some of those smaller cities don't have as many of those amenities. I think they do touch on schools and the fact that some of the school districts are more appealing in the smaller areas. But then they also touch on the fact that with the fast growth, that those schools are quickly needing more resources. And I saw one quote from someone from the school district expressing appreciation that the residents that have moved there are in favor of passing the bonds that are necessary in order to fund the schools to keep them at the level that is appealing to people.
And even we were talking about Kyle's tweet where it showed the data was young people aren't moving to high dense large cities. They were moving to like more Fort Worth-esque
suburban and the sprawl in those areas. So I said, are they doing that because they desire that, or are they doing that because that's where quote unquote affordable housing is available? And I think my opinion is that the studies I've seen show that people desire to be in those urban core areas, as well as, I mean, some people want to live out and have acreage around them and don't want their neighbors to be close. I'm not one of those people, but there's definitely that too. So I think it's important to have both, but I think that the reason that people are mainly going to the more suburban sprawl areas is because that's where the houses are that they can afford.
Yeah, and I think like this, it's kind of this evolution too, is like when I look at young home buyers who if it's my friends or if it's people, a lot of people see Texas, like the brand is, oh, you could buy a big house for cheap. Like that's the brand of us. So it's the first appealing of exploring Texas is seeing these houses on TikTok for $500,000 that we probably need to upgrade. What does the brand of a Texas house look like in an urban metro? And like, what does that brand look like to show that it's still Texas, right? I do think, something about a yard is appealing to a lot of people who move to Texas. So like yard space, really eats up a lot of people who made like, this house is expensive, but I got, 10 feet of yard space. So it's like the reasons people are moving Texas is the opposite of, I think we need to just upgrade our brand.
I have books at home called The Not So Big House, and I kind of subscribe to the not so big house, that having a house that is efficient and has the things that we need for a family of 4, which we were at one point before we were empty nesters, that we bought our house thinking that it was maybe a starter house and that we would eventually get that bigger house that people want to have, and we just never did. And now I'm so glad we didn't, because I can't imagine being in a house bigger than the house we're in with just my husband and myself in this empty nester situation that we're in now.
Both of my dad and my stepmom and my in-laws both sold their big old houses in nowhere, Texas. Now they RV because they said it was just so depressing to be in a big house by yourself.
Yeah. And a big house that isn't walkable to things, a big house that doesn't have things to, amenities nearby that are close, that you have to get in your car and drive to everything, I think these are personal preferences, but I don't think I'm the only one on the planet with these personal preferences.
So let's go ahead. Like we also have on this docket that Fort Worth is trying to be proactive on this with the city planning and how we have the new. Can you walk us through what is Fort Worth Labs and why do you see this as a beneficial thing?
Yeah, they've got an article. The Fort Worth Report did an article called Planning Data Combined in New City of Fort Worth Department Focused on Budgeting and Finance. So Fort Worth has newly formed a department called FW Lab, puts the city on the cutting edge of rethinking its budget process and looking to make sure that local government finance for the next 20 years. They are transforming the planning and data analytics department into Fort Worth Lab, and the goal is to better integrate data into the city's long-term planning process for budgeting to bonds to the city's forthcoming comprehensive plan. And the person who's heading up this department is Mark McDaniel, who I had the pleasure of meeting with just the other day. And he has a really strong focus on comprehensive planning and understands kind of planning for the various sectors of the city and having a real strong engagement piece. So that was also touched on in this article. And I think all of this is good planning, because if you make a plan and then you don't tie it to any kind of budgeting, then it's a plan that sits on a shelf and could ebb and flow of whether it gets implemented or not based on the current desires of the elected officials at the time, and then also has to compete in every budget cycle for funding. But what I think are planning to do with this process is come up with those plans and tie it to budget and tie it to priorities so that it is all kind of connected and not as vulnerable to being cut as different priorities rise above.
Yeah. What's a healthy cadence to comprehensive planning a city? Like what's an ideal where it's not where it doesn't get stale? Like, hey, I expect a year we have a plan, or 2 years we have a plan, and then so a comprehensive plan is technically supposed to be like a 20-year plan or a 30-year plan, and it's not something that you necessarily do every year. The city of Fort Worth is about to enter into a once in 2 decade planning process because they haven't done a overall comprehensive plan for the whole city in 2 decades. They definitely have looked at the comprehensive plan, and they've done that yearly. But because they haven't looked at the overall city in its totality, I think this is a really unique opportunity for folks to have input and say in that. And they just recently signed a contract with a consultant to do the engagement piece of that plan. And my understanding is that they're going to do some of the comprehensive plan in-house, but they may also budget to do some of that comprehensive plan with consultants. But technically, a comprehensive plan is not something that you tweak every year, but you build in parts of it to occur so that you can measure that those things are happening instead of just doing a comprehensive plan saying this is what we want to look like in 20 years and sticking it up on a shelf, breaking it down so that you are being able to check off those accomplishments as the years go by. So we will start this comprehensive plan in 2024, 2025?
That's the plan. Yeah. They've just hired this consultant. I think they're planning to start the engagement piece in the fall. They talked a little bit about doing it in the summer, but summer is a time when a lot of people are traveling and things slow down. So it's hard to engage the community when they're traveling and not around.
Yeah, I'm watching the city council Instagrams. They're definitely not in Texas right now.
There's a lot of traveling going on.
When you heard this big umbrella story and then, you look at Fort Worth in the Metroplex, what can we do better or need to be thinking through as, we prepare to maybe potentially be a part of the number one metro?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I mentioned before that oftentimes people kind of sit back and don't bother to get involved until something threatening is knocking on their door. And I think that this opportunity is a great opportunity for people to get involved proactively on the front end, to have conversations about what we want to look like and be like and what our priorities are. I mean, I think that elected officials and city staff are constantly hearing from people when they are upset and feeling like something that's important to them has been neglected or underfunded or not funded. And we've gone through budget processes year after year after year where we tell people, come and tell us the city tells you, come and tell us what is important to you and what you would like to see funded. And if you are the loudest voices in the room and you show up at every single meeting, then maybe we'll tweak the budget to reflect what it is that you're telling us. And this is much more of a based on data how we're going to fund these things. And that piece about equity comes into play as well. And I think that's so very important. So it's not about going to every single meeting and being the loudest voice in the room. It's about learning what would be beneficial, kind of what we touched on in a previous pod where you talked about knowing who's in your neighborhood and what things that they're lacking will kind of make a change in maybe what you think is necessary for your neighborhood.
That was my favorite episode. But
yeah, so people coming together and talking about those things. And you can start from very different opinions. You can be like, I want to fund pools and I think we should only be building roads. And you can figure out, if you're willing to talk to people and hear why those needs are important to them, maybe some kind of compromise and collaboration and coalition around things that will be beneficial to the broader community.
Do you want to give us some examples of things that you see in Fort Worth recently? I know we have a couple. To me, a recent article that came out was the high-rise one. The high-rise one was really cool. And to me, I wonder, I get lost on, what's a benchmark of that we need to show that we're going in the right direction. Does the size of our buildings and the number of buildings and the number of feet in the air we have, and if we're not number one in Texas or number 3 in Texas in that, we should feel like we're not a metro or a big city.
Well, it's funny because this article from the Fort Worth Report is titled "Downtown Fort Worth Could Reach New Heights with New Buildings." And when the Frost Tower was built, it was very heralded as the first skyscraper that we had in 20 years. But now we've got another residential building that has gone up. Well, I think that there's always been in the comprehensive plan that downtown should be the place where those high rises exist because there's an unlimited height in downtown. So in H zoning downtown, you can build as high as you want.
Which is why South Main's apartments seem so low.
So the interesting thing is, people call those high-rise multifamily, but they're definitely not.
Yeah.
And many of the residential products that we've gotten in downtown have not been as high as you would probably want to see in the urban core of the city. So you're using up valuable downtown land on mid-rise and low-rise. But this article is basically pointing out that we are getting some higher buildings. So Burnett Plaza has remained the tallest building in Fort Worth since it opened in 1983. And at first glance, high-rise development in the city has been mostly at a standstill since the oil and gas boom of the early 80s. However, experts say that upcoming projects may signal a potential for a surge in sky-high building development. So the Deco 969 building is 27 stories on Commerce Street, and it's right near the Central train station, which is a multimodal transit hub. And it won't be higher than the Burnett Plaza, which is 40 stories, but it may lead to future development of high rises. I think that developer is actually already looking for a second spot downtown to build a second building. So new projects might lead to a boom in downtown population, they reference impacting traffic and congestion, but also increasing demand for dining retail establishments as well. The urban core of the city is not something you want people driving through at a fast rate. It's a destination. And the infrastructure is all already there. And there's the highest public transportation availability there as well.
What's your take on that part of the article there where it almost felt a little bit, yeah, we're going to build it and see if they come kind of energy. Like it feels like they're not sure about the new deco building being, I know they said all the leases are out and all that jazz, but I feel like a lot of developers choose this, oh, we're going to build it and see if people come and go move and live downtown. I have not met a lot of people who's like, I want to live in downtown Fort Worth. I mean, like I've never met, I don't meet a lot of people, maybe near South Side, Magnolia, Alamo, Arlington Heights, Walsh Ranch, maybe. I don't know. I don't hear I want to live downtown, but it feels like they're making a big bet that people are going to be like, it's going to be woo enough for people to be like, you know what, I can see this now, and maybe I want to do it.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things driving that. I mean, as someone who's always been kind of urban core, downtown minded, I run into a lot of people who want to live in the urban core. So I think that I did talk to folks who wanted to be able to live in the urban core and have families, and they were lacking amenities. And so I met several people who started out as young people and moved out because they wanted more room for their kids or more parks or other amenities for their kids. And so it has kind of evolved into a place where mainly younger people or older people, retired people live. But I think with A&M coming downtown, there's going to be people who want to be close to where they're going to school. So I think that would be, and the law school expanding, there. I think that that's going to be a draw. I think that the connectivity of everything that you can get to from Central Station, if we get high-speed rail at some point, I mean, the things you can be connected to from a downtown Fort Worth are going to be incredible. And if you're not looking for that thing that other article we touched on with there's more land around you, having your neighbors be further away from, the amenities that you can get into downtown, I think are appealing to a certain segment of the population.
Yeah. No, and it'd be cool to see the development. I mean, I'd be interested to see like the data between tall buildings and city limit sizes, right? So Fort Worth has a large city limit size, so we have not high buildings.
Yeah, I think because we have that large city limit size, we haven't had the concentration in our downtown the way some other cities have had. I mean, comparing a Fort Worth or even a Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex to New York City is not really a comparison that makes any sense at all because they are completely constrained and they can't sprawl out the way we have. So I think that the importance of focusing on doing it right, allowing that development to happen in the urban core, emphasizing that high-rise development in the Metroplex is different than some other areas, and that there's still kind of some hesitancy about what office is going to look like. I think most of the development that's occurred recently has been hotel and residential, but I think that all of those things can coexist and be positive things for the downtown area in Fort Worth. So this article wraps up saying that the new buildings under construction, which are mostly for residential use, could lead to more people living in downtown Fort Worth. And as you said, you feel like it's more kind of a we're going to build it and see if they come situation. I feel like there's a lot of amenities in a downtown that are conducive to people wanting to come. And I doubt that there's a whole lot of speculation with these developers. I think they probably have some data that shows that the occupancy rates are very high, the rents are being able to be obtained, and that there is a demand for this. So I'm not seeing that this is probably going to fall flat. I think we are going to end up getting more people living in the urban core of the city.
What are the priorities you think we need to have if we really are going to become a place people want to live in 2100 and be the number one metro in the country?
Yeah, that's a big ticket to be able to accomplish. And while I believe that we should concentrate on making sure that we have all different diverse housing types that, are desirable to the various people, if people want to live in the urban core, having a variety of housing there, if people want to live further out and have a little land around themselves, have what they need there, then having the resources that they need in all of those places. I think it comes down to planning. And, that I guess is a personal bias of mine because that's the field that I've been in my entire life. So I think it's important to plan all those things and prioritize all those things. And I think we have a great opportunity in the upcoming plans that the city has to revisit the comprehensive plan and take a look at all of these things. Because in the past, I think the comp plan has had a lot of kind of placeholder colors on a map. So not necessarily diving down into exactly what will that look like in the long run and how will we serve that. So if you just have single family homes in an area and then people move into those homes and then they're like, well, where's my community center? Where's my fire station? How do I get my kid to school without sitting on a little 2-lane road stuck in traffic for 45 minutes? So I think these things can all be addressed with comprehensive planning. And the city is about to launch into that. And so when I was sharing with someone that is something that I think everyone should be interested and engaged in, I was asked, well, exactly what is a comprehensive plan and why should I even care about it? Yeah. And to me, it is an opportunity to not always be gearing up for a fight when something is proposed or done that's incremental in your neighborhood that goes opposite of what you saw the place that you live being. If you can be involved up front and have input into what that looks like and what the priorities are, then you're going to end up with an end result. But also being open to change. Like the article talked about the growth that's occurring. Some of these people have moved out to these smaller cities to get that kind of more rural feel, and they see that development coming towards them, and they realize that they weren't the first ones to be there, and more people are coming.
Well, I think a lot of the challenge that urban planners face as a bystander to it all is, right, America's heavy capitalism and heavy grow really, really fast. And Texas really prides itself on, not, come here.
Staying out of the way.
Yeah, staying out of the way and come here. Even the new, my win's going to be the Major League Cricket, being here in Dallas, Fort Worth area. But they said they built their stadium for cricket in 2 years. They're like, yeah, we got all the plan, we got all that. And they're like, I couldn't do that anywhere else. And that's why the Major League Cricket is in Texas. And so it's like, I feel like a lot of people, I feel like that's the battle with like Texas lingo that really makes it like, we don't see the consequences of these sprawls. And like we just let the other people deal with it sitting on lines.
And then it's more expensive.
Yeah, because it's not their problem. Like, oh, I'm here.
So an example of that is I was going to talk about the fact that TexRail was added to the airport after the airport was already built. And so there's a little bit of a challenge to get to the terminals you need to get to because it wasn't integrated into the original plan for the airport. So in the last week or so, I've gotten calls from about 5 different people asking me how to take the train to the airport. And one person, it was her elderly father that he wanted to take the train to the airport. And my concern was it was going to be 108 degrees on the day he was going to the airport. And if he is going out of A or B, he has a bit of a walk to get to the terminal from where the train drops off. And if he's going to one of the others, he's got to be on an app that shows whether his gate has changed and he's going to get onto the right Skylink to get to whatever terminal he's going to go to. So if you plan ahead and you incorporate these things ahead of time and you have a multimodal system, you can kind of alleviate some of those little challenges in the long run that then people who are opposed to having multimodal transit can point to and say, see, it's not working or it's challenging or it's hard and it's not as easy as just parking your car right in front. And so therefore, nobody's going to do it. So I think that kind of points out the planning ahead of time and incorporating it into the plan.
Yeah, that's a great point because as someone who's at the airport all the time, like it's so much work to then go from the rail to the next gate. But, I don't mind it and walking and all that jazz. But yeah, but if you're an elder person who you want to do it, that it is a trek to get from the B area where it stops, walk the sidewalks to get up to the gates.
I think the signage is improved, which is great. There's messages now above the baggage claim. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Very cool. You can plug in your dying phone and get some charge and go about your business. So
yeah. So I think for everyone listening here, It's planning to be thoughtful of what are the consequences that can happen from sprawl, but then also building too fast, but then also reimagining the narrative of what it means to be feeling like you live in a home in Texas when the stereotype of big old houses that are affordable is starting to be a facade, because I'm starting to see no house is affordable.
Yeah, that's what the article touches on. Even those houses that are further out are becoming expensive. And so it's not as cheap unless you're coming from a place where you sold your house for millions of dollars.
Yeah. So really, it's interesting. And I agree. I can see where different people would want to live differently in different lifestyles, different times of their lifestyle, right? Raising a family, people think they want a big house. Hey, I'm empty nesters. I want to live downtown, be able to walk to things, have a cool high rise.
And what I encourage people to be aware of is just what are the trade-offs for the decisions that you're making. So you might be in a smaller house in the urban core, but be close to all kinds of resources. We bought our house in an urban core neighborhood that had a park across the street. We have a very small yard, but we have a park across the street. There's other places where you can have more of that land that's your personal land and not have your neighbors so close to you, but you're going to have to drive to a grocery store, whereas I can walk to 2 grocery stores. So these are all trade-offs. And people, in the article, it talked about how much of a commute people are willing to put up with. And this guy was saying, and as long as it's under an hour, he's totally fine with that. That seems like a long commute to me. I wouldn't want to have to drive an hour every day just to get to work.
Yeah. And it creates isolation. It creates lack of civic ability, community. I feel like that's the part that running into people when you're more dense is what I appreciate, living in the loop. Well, I think we hit this home, and we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you like where you live? Thoughts of what you would do differently? Things that you feel like people should optimize for? I mean, there's so many things going in my head of why I would live somewhere and I wouldn't live somewhere, and it's just because of my unique lifestyles and needs. So I know we all have that, and we need to make a Fort Worth and a DFW that fits all of that, and then maybe one day we can all get on a Texas rail right to our gate and be happy to hang out in the second world's busiest airport.
And we've touched on transit a little bit, and we were going to have a guest this day who we had to reschedule, but that is something that we'll be having coming up. And I think we might have teased that on a previous episode, but we're going to have somebody, the head of Trinity Metro, visiting with us at an upcoming episode, so we can dive even deeper into this transit conversation.
Cool. Let's move to wins and losses. I already kind of brought up my win, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. The Major League Cricket started their first ever league like this week or two. They got games going on now. They got the championship to July 30th. And I think this is really cool because cricket is the second most popular sporting event game in the world. And you may not know this, but we have the second largest Indian American population, which they are very popular. Cricket is very popular to them. And you got places like Irving, if you live in Irving, where you have a large Indian American population, or Frisco. And so to me, to see that Dallas, it's in Grand Prairie, but to see that that we are starting the America's National Cricket League, to me, I wish I was a rich person that I could invest in this, because this just seems like a very smart, practical thing. We're going to have more Indian Americans here. There's going to be more community. I'm excited to go to a game. My probably loss to it all is I know Ross Perot Jr. is an investor in it. He threw out the first little ball. It was 103 degrees out there. It was sold out. So there was just a lot of excitement, and I just feel like Fort Worth, might be sitting on the sideline on this one. But it's a positive for the whole, and I still think it's super early because it's only year one. But I'm going to try to make a game, even though I have no idea how cricket works. I'm going to watch a YouTube video before I go. But I thought that's a win to be able to be a global. If we're going to be the number one metro, we got to be a global space where you can find anyone and anywhere loving something about the rest of the world. I realized that I did my win first, and we usually do our losses first. So now I'm just going to share my loss, and then you, Ann, can share your loss and finish with a win. My loss is just going to the North Fort Worth. Right before we left for 2 weeks, we talked about an incident that just seemed kind of murky. 2 individuals were killed by a police officer, and I believe an investigator was the other person. But anyways, it's still sticky to this day. 2 weeks later, Chief Noakes and the Fort Worth PD and Carlos Flores is telling us to be patient. I just think that if a police officer kills somebody, they should be really fast on why and how. They send some body cam. I've been waiting. I mean, the last news article I've seen about this was July 12th. I mean, it's time to figure out what really happened here. And so my loss is that this just looks very sticky and murky. I'm not saying anything wrong happened. I'm just saying that we need to get to answers faster because this is how things boil up and people get upset. And it leads to not more faith in our law enforcement.
So since EJ did his wins and losses together, I will start with my loss so that we can end on a win. But my loss is that just yesterday, I believe, the Barry Theater was demolished. It's a historic Fort Worth theater, and it was found to be too costly to save. I don't have any negative feelings about Mercy Clinic and the mission that they have, and that is providing medical and dental services to underserved populations in 76110 and 76104, which was added in the last few years. I think that they absolutely should stay focused on their mission because the work that they do is very, very important. I do think and I think that, again, my loss is turning into wins if people will do the right thing going forward. And the hope is that eventually there will be some kind of cultural center on the South Side, that the Barry Theater could possibly have been a gathering place, that important, where people come together in places that are available to the public. And hopefully, I think that the current council member for that area, Jeanette Martinez, is focused on making sure that there is a cultural center of some sort in the future, and would like to work with the community to make sure that that happens. It's sad to watch a building be torn down. I think that somebody locally bought the sign. There was some concern yesterday on some of the social media platforms about what happened to the sign. But I understand that someone local from the neighborhood has acquired that sign. So hopefully that clinic will be built and it will be a continuing growing asset for the community. But I think that this points back to opportunities to get out ahead of demolition of historic buildings if folks that find a passion for this work can coalesce around structures that Historic Fort Worth points out on a yearly basis, and try to find those resources and put those buildings together with people who would like to preserve them, and avail themselves of the tax credits and all the different things, and not just see the preservation of historic buildings as some kind of onerous, overwhelming task that is unachievable. So I'm hoping that that will be the future. As far as my win, there was an article in Fort Worth Inc. magazine that North Texas Community Foundation has awarded $477,000 in support of racial equity, and that this is added to funding that they have done over the years, results in the foundation has put $455 million in assets and made grants totaling approximately $444 million in 2022, according to a press release. And they listed off the 2023 grantees that are getting this funding. They include Arts Fort Worth, Community Frontline. I mean, you'll recognize many of the groups that are doing work on racial equity in our community. And this is really important work, and glad to see that the North Texas Communities Foundation is making such an impact with those partners in our community.
I love it. Well, beautiful people, we have got to the end of the show. If you're still here, we appreciate you. Thank you for eating your vegetables and hanging out with us. We're going to have a lot of great interviews coming up and a lot of more stories as council and team and everyone starts getting back from July and getting ready for school and all the other good stuff that comes with getting into the second half of the year. So we'll be here. We'll be doing episodes, and it's every Monday morning. So thank you for being a part of the community.
Hope to see you next week.
Follow us like double tap. Now they control your life, control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us like double tap.